Have you ever considered the true cost of what remains unseen? Not the things hidden in shadows, but the immense, undeniable value of a person, consistently overlooked, consistently underestimated, simply because their brilliance doesn't fit neatly into the expected narrative? Imagine the profound impact when the quiet architect of stability, the invisible glue holding everything together, simply steps away. Leah Tran, at 32 years old, carried the weight of her family's entire logistical empire on her slender shoulders, a fact acknowledged by precisely no one within her own kin. From her modest apartment in Frankfurt, she orchestrated the meticulous dance of supply chains, negotiated complex contracts, and untangled the inevitable snarls of international trade for the family's lucrative textile import business. Her title? Ostensibly, logistics manager. Her perceived role within the family, however, was far less glamorous, infinitely more demeaning. The helpful daughter, the quiet one who handled the tedious, unglamorous tasks, allowing her elder sister, Anya, to bask in the spotlight of social grace and impending nuptials. Anya, vivacious and effortlessly charming, was the beloved public face of the business, lauded for her connections and her ability to schmooze clients, while Leah painstakingly ensured those clients actually received their meticulously sourced silk and cashmere. The disparity festered, a slow-burning ember of resentment beneath Leah's calm exterior. She loved her family, deeply, fiercely, but their blindness was a constant, sharp ache. The final, searing blow came not in a grand betrayal, but in a casual, thoughtless dismissal. Anya's wedding, a sprawling, opulent affair, was drawing near, consuming all of the family's attention and a significant portion of the company's capital. Leah, despite being the one managing the intricate international shipping of the bride's bespoke gown and the exotic floral arrangements, was consistently sidelined. "Lee, darling, would you mind helping Aunt May sort through the old linens in the attic for the reception? You're so good at tidying." Her mother had cooed one afternoon, her eyes fixed on a bridal magazine, completely oblivious to the irony. "Anya needs to focus on her fitting." The words, seemingly innocuous, struck Leah with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just the linens, it was the endless errands, the last-minute crisis averted without thanks, the assumption that her time, her energy, her very identity, was inextricably linked to the menial, the background, the tidying up, her expertise, her strategic mind. The countless sleepless nights spent navigating customs delays and volatile shipping lanes, all of it was reduced to domesticity. It was then, in that moment of profound, painful clarity, that something within Lee snapped. A quiet resolution settled over her, cold and absolute. She smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Of course, Mother, I'll get right to it." But it wasn't the linens she planned to sort. It was her life. Leah's departure was not a storm, but a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the air pressure, a silence where there had once been a hum. She submitted her resignation via email late one Friday night, concise and professional, offering a 2-week notice as per her contract, knowing full well they wouldn't bother to read it closely until Monday. She tidied her desk, a habit ingrained by years of ensuring operational perfection, but left no note, no dramatic flourish. The family, consumed by wedding preparations and their own perceived grandeur, barely noticed her absence during that transitional fortnight. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Tran, senior figures in the business, assumed she was simply taking a well-deserved, if unannounced, vacation. Anya, too wrapped up in satin and floral arrangements, made a passing comment about Leah being a bit quiet lately, attributing it to pre-wedding jitters, not the tectonic plates shifting beneath their feet. The initial signs of disarray were subtle, easily dismissed. A shipment of cashmere from Mongolia was routed incorrectly, causing a 3-day delay. "Oh, customs being difficult again." Her father grumbled, sipping his espresso, completely oblivious that Leah had cultivated a personal relationship with the lead customs officer. a relationship that often smoothed such issues. Then, a crucial order of silk scarves for a high-profile client arrived with a defect, necessitating an urgent reorder from a different supplier. Just bad luck. Anya shrugged, more concerned about the color palette of her bridesmaids' dresses. These things happen. The problems were attributed to external factors, to the capriciousness of global trade, to anything but the void Leah had left behind. They had outsourced all the mundane tasks to her, creating a silo of expertise that was now, suddenly, empty. Leah, meanwhile, felt a strange mix of liberation and lingering guilt. The first few days were disorienting. The rhythmic pulse of her old life, the constant ping of emails and urgent calls, was gone. She walked through Frankfurt's bustling streets, a sense of lightness in her step she hadn't felt in years. She visited art galleries, sat in quiet cafes, and began to read the stack of books that had gathered dust on her nightstand. Yet, the ingrained sense of responsibility tugged at her. She knew the intricate dance of their supply chain, the hidden pitfalls, the delicate balance of their client relationships. She knew what was coming. But for the first time in her life, it wasn't her problem to fix. She wasn't escaping responsibility. She was reclaiming her own agency. She began to research job opportunities, not just in logistics, but in fields that genuinely interested her, fields where her analytical mind and quiet competence might actually be valued, not just tolerated. The silence, initially unsettling, slowly began to hum with the promise of new beginnings, a stark contrast to the growing dissonance she knew was building back at the family business. The quiet departure was, in its own way, the loudest statement she had ever made. The cracks in the Tran family business, initially hairline fractures, began to widen with alarming speed, threatening the very foundation they had taken for granted. The bad luck multiplied. Missed deadlines turned into canceled orders. Major retailers, accustomed to the Tran company's impeccable efficiency, began to express serious concerns. A large shipment of bespoke suits, destined for a prestigious fashion house in Milan, mysteriously disappeared in transit, only to be discovered weeks later in a warehouse in Dusseldorf, completely ruined by water damage. The insurance claim was denied due to neglected paperwork and an overlooked clause in the shipping contract, details Leah would have meticulously reviewed. The frantic attempts by Mr. and Mrs. Tran to fix the problems only exacerbated them. Their understanding of logistics was superficial, gleaned from Leah's reports rather than hands-on experience. They tried to delegate tasks to other employees, mid-level managers who, despite their best efforts, lacked Leah's institutional knowledge, her intricate network of contacts, and her almost intuitive grasp of complex systems. Arguments erupted in the executive offices, hushed whispers giving way to shouting matches about incompetence and sabotage. Anya, for her part, remained largely detached, her mind preoccupied with table settings and floral arrangements, occasionally offering a dismissive, "Oh, surely it can't be that bad. Daddy will fix it." Her oblivious attitude perfectly encapsulated the family's antagonist dynamic, a profound inability to acknowledge the source of their stability, a deep-seated contempt for the unglamorous foundational work. They called in consultants, expensive, sleek professionals who offered generic advice that proved useless without the granular data and historical context only Leah possessed. "Where is the master inventory list for Q3?" one consultant asked, flipping through disorganized folders. "Leah always handled that," was the common, helpless reply. She just knew where everything was. The answers were always the same. Lee did that. Lee knew that. Lee handled it. Yet, not once did they connect the escalating chaos to Leah's complete absence. They were still in a state of profound denial, believing the problems were external, not a gaping wound in their own operational heart. Meanwhile, Leah found a temporary job at a small independent bookstore, a stark contrast to the high-stakes world of international trade. She organized shelves, managed inventory for local authors, and learned about digital marketing. The work was simple, grounding, and gave her space to think, to heal, to truly breathe for the first time in years. Here, her innate competence, her quiet precision, was appreciated, even in the humble task of categorizing literature. She wasn't just a helpful daughter here. She was a valued, reliable team member, even if her full potential remained largely hidden. The contrast was stark. One world was spiraling into chaos from her absence, the other quietly benefiting from her unpretentious presence. The ripple effect of Leah's departure, initially confined to the Tran family business, began to spread outward, affecting their most significant clients. Large fashion houses, high-end boutiques, and even international hotel chains that relied on the Tran company for their bespoke textile needs started to feel the pinch. Deliveries became unreliable, quality control plummeted, and communication channels, once seamless under Leah's meticulous oversight, fractured into frustrating silences. Financial losses began to mount, not just for the Tran company, but for their clients, who faced production delays, empty shelves, and disappointed customers. One such client was Mr. Elias Vance, the exacting CEO of Vance and Company, a luxury apparel brand known for its uncompromising quality and timely releases. For years, Vance and Company had relied solely on Tran textiles for their silk and wool supply, a partnership built on trust and consistent excellence. Now, Mr. Vance faced a looming crisis. A crucial holiday collection was imperiled because several fabric shipments were either late, incorrect, or entirely missing. His frustration morphed into genuine concern. He remembered Leah. He remembered her quiet efficiency, her almost telepathic ability to anticipate problems, her polite but firm guidance, always ensuring the smooth flow of goods. He recalled how she would personally call to confirm every detail, how she once averted a major disaster by rerouting a fabric shipment through an alternate port during a strike, without ever needing his intervention. "Get me Lee Tran," he instructed his bewildered assistant, who could only offer, "Sir, Miss Tran is no longer with Tran Textiles." The news hit Mr. Vance with the force of an unexpected blow. He tried contacting the Tran family directly, only to be met with vague assurances and dismissive platitudes from an increasingly flustered Mr. Tran. "We're experiencing minor adjustments," Mr. Tran had stammered, while Vance and Company's entire production line ground to a halt. Mr. Vance, a shrewd businessman who valued competence above all else, recognized the pattern. The core of the problem lay within the Tran company itself, and specifically, with Leah's absence. The Tran family, meanwhile, was sinking deeper into chaos. Their creditors were calling daily. Their bank was threatening to freeze accounts, and even Anya's once lavish wedding budget was being aggressively trimmed, much to her tearful dismay. They still hadn't pieced it together, still spoke of unforeseen circumstances and a string of bad luck, completely blind to the foundational role Leah had played. In her quiet corner of Frankfurt, Leah, meanwhile, was excelling in her unassuming role at the bookstore. She had streamlined their inventory system, reducing waste and increasing efficiency, much to the delight of the store owner, a kind, elderly woman named Frau Schmidt. Leah had even organized a successful charity book drive for local schools, showcasing her innate ability to connect systems and people, her talent, a quiet current flowing beneath the surface, waiting for the right channel. Her true gift, the ability to bring order and efficiency to any system, however large or small, could not be contained, no matter how hard her family had tried to diminish it. The Tran family business, once a pillar of Frankfurt's textile industry, was teetering on the brink of collapse. Creditors were circling like vultures. Key suppliers had put them on cash-on-delivery terms, and their once loyal workforce was demoralized and contemplating mass resignations. The wedding, once a symbol of their prosperity, now felt like a cruel mockery, an extravagant expenditure amidst their unraveling fortunes. Mr. Tran, his face etched with strain, paced his office, muttering about hiring the best consultants in Germany, convinced an external miracle worker would solve their woes. Mrs. Tran, usually composed, now spent her days on the phone, her voice tight with thinly veiled panic, attempting to appease increasingly irate clients. Anya, finally realizing the severity of their situation, had postponed her wedding, a decision that brought her to tears, not for the business, but for her shattered dreams of a fairy tale ceremony. The desperate search for solutions began. They rummaged through Lee's old office, finding meticulously organized files, but lacking the context, the mental algorithms, the network of relationships that made them useful. They tried to replicate her systems, but without her intricate knowledge, it was like trying to reassemble a complex machine from a pile of disconnected parts, without a blueprint. The painful realization began to dawn, slowly at first, then with increasing clarity. Leah was the linchpin. She just kept everything running. Mr. Tran mumbled one evening, staring blankly at a pile of unpaid invoices. We never had to worry about logistics when Leah was here. The grudging admission was still far from an apology, still a statement of fact rather than an acknowledgement of their own culpability. They debated calling her, but pride and a lingering sense of indignation at her abandonment held them back. Meanwhile, the discerning eyes of Mr. Elias Vance had not forgotten Leah. After the frustrating non-answers from the Tran family, he had launched his own discreet inquiry. He reached out to his network, asking about a highly competent logistics manager formerly with Tran Textiles. It wasn't long before a trusted contact in a small industry group mentioned Leah Tran, now working part-time at a bookstore but highly regarded for her volunteer work in streamlining local community projects. Mr. Vance, a man of action and keen perception, saw beyond the humble facade. He didn't just want to fix his immediate supply chain issues. He recognized a hidden gem, a talent that had been cruelly undervalued. He instructed his executive assistant to schedule a meeting with Miss N and RD. Leah Tran, not as a desperate plea for help for the Tran family, but as a direct overture for a significant, new opportunity for her. He was not looking for a temporary fix. He was looking to build something new, something better, with the architect of true efficiency. The stage was set, unknown to the Tran family, for the quiet force they had so carelessly discarded to re-enter their world, not as a servant, but as a formidable professional in her own right. Mr. Elias Vance, sharp-suited and radiating an aura of quiet authority, met Leah not in a sterile corporate office, but in a small, elegant cafe near her bookstore. He observed her carefully as she entered, her posture still unassuming, her eyes intelligent and alert. He began not with a frantic plea, but with a direct, respectful acknowledgement of her past work. "Miss Tran," he began, his voice calm, "I've always admired the unparalleled efficiency you brought to Tran Textiles. Your systems, your foresight, the way you handled unexpected challenges, it was truly exceptional. Since your departure, our partnership with them has, regrettably, deteriorated beyond repair." Lee listened, a guarded expression on her face. Years of being overlooked had built a protective shell around her, a deep-seated wariness of being exploited again. She remembered the late nights, the thankless tasks, the constant dismissal. "Mr. Vance," she replied, her voice steady, "I appreciate your kind words, but I'm no longer involved in that industry." Her hesitation was palpable, a defensive reflex. He leaned forward, his gaze direct. "I understand completely," he said, his tone empathetic. "And I'm not here to ask you to return to your previous situation. I'm here to offer you a new beginning." He then laid out his proposal. A newly created high-level position as Director of Global Logistics for Vance and Company, with a substantial salary, a dedicated team, and complete autonomy to build and implement a state-of-the-art supply chain from the ground up. He emphasized that he wasn't looking for a fix-it person for an existing problem, but a visionary to build a new future. I believe your talent, Miss Tran, has been tragically underutilized. I don't want a manager. I want an architect. I want someone who sees not just the existing paths, but the entirely new ones waiting to be forged. The stark contrast between Mr. Vance's genuine respect and her family's casual dismissiveness was almost overwhelming. There was no condescension, no expectation of servitude, only a profound recognition of her worth. He spoke of her as a professional, a strategic partner, an indispensable asset. He even acknowledged the difficult position she had been in, implicitly understanding the family dynamics without her having to utter a single complaint. Leah felt a thawing within her, a cautious hope. She spent the next few days weighing the offer, battling her internal doubts, the echoes of her family's voices telling her she was just Lee. But Mr. Vance's words resonated. An architect. The opportunity was not just a job, it was an affirmation of her true capabilities. While Leah pondered a future of empowered leadership, the Tran family was consumed by their own rapidly escalating crisis. They had finally hired a new logistics manager, a well-meaning but overwhelmed young man who was drowning in the chaos Leah had navigated effortlessly. Accounts were frozen, suppliers were filing lawsuits, and the once vibrant office was a ghost town of despair. They were entirely oblivious to the fact that the solution to their woes, the very person who could have saved them, was now being courted by one of their most powerful former clients, offered a throne built on the very skills they had mocked as tidying up. Leah accepted Mr. Vance's offer, and in the weeks that followed, she transformed. It wasn't just the professional attire or the spacious new office with panoramic views of the city, it was an internal shift, a blossoming of confidence that came from being truly seen and valued. She immersed herself in the intricate world of Vance and Company, meticulously analyzing their existing supply chain, identifying inefficiencies, and designing innovative solutions. She implemented cutting-edge software, forged new relationships with more reliable suppliers, and streamlined their global distribution network with an almost surgical precision. Within 6 months, Vance and Company's logistics operations became a benchmark in the industry, admired for its speed, accuracy, and resilience. Production costs decreased, delivery times shortened, and customer satisfaction soared. Mr. Vance often observed her at work, a quiet smile on his face, knowing he had made the right choice. Miss Tran, you are truly a master of your craft. He often told her, and this time the words felt earned, not a hollow platitude. Meanwhile, the Tran family business was in a state of utter ruin. The building that once housed their bustling operations now stood quiet, desolate, its windows reflecting the grim Frankfurt sky. Major clients, including many of Vance and Company's competitors who had heard whispers of Leah's transformative work, had pulled out, unable to tolerate the perpetual delays and errors. Suppliers demanded liquidation of assets to cover outstanding debts. The bank had foreclosed on their primary warehouse, and the once proud Tran family name was whispered in industry circles, synonymous with spectacular failure. Anya's wedding was cancelled, the grand affair replaced by a bitter argument over who was to blame. They often spoke of Leah, but always with a mixture of resentment and victimhood. She abandoned us when we needed her most, Mrs. Tran lamented to a sympathetic aunt, conveniently forgetting their years of dismissal. Such disloyalty, Mr. Tran fumed, clinging to his pride even as his empire crumbled. The dramatic irony was suffocating. They blamed Leah for their collapse, completely blind to the fact that their own arrogance and neglect were the true architects of their downfall. They mourned the loss of their wealth, their status, their dream, but never truly the loss of Leah's immense contribution, not in a way that truly acknowledged their profound misjudgment. The whispers of Leah's success with Vance and Company began to circulate through the very industry that had once undervalued her. Competitors marveled at Vance and Company's newfound efficiency, attributing it to a brilliant new logistics director. Former colleagues from Tran Textiles, now struggling to find new jobs, spoke of Leah with a mix of awe and regret, The world, it seemed, was finally taking notice of the quiet force they had all, in their own ways, underestimated. The contrast was stark, undeniable, one life rising to prominence, while another, steeped in pride and blindness, crumbled into dust. The Tran family, desperate and humbled, finally heard the unmistakable whispers of Leah's burgeoning success. It wasn't just a rumor, it was a glaring, undeniable fact echoing through the industry. Vance and Company, once a key client of theirs, was now lauded as a model of logistical excellence, and Leah Tran was unequivocally credited as the architect of this transformation. The news reached them like a cold, hard slap to the face. They saw her picture in trade magazines, now poised and confident, speaking at industry conferences about innovation and efficiency. The woman they had dismissed as merely helpful was now a celebrated leader, her name uttered with respect, even reverence, in the same circles where their own had become a cautionary tale. Their initial reaction was a mixture of disbelief and renewed resentment. It must be luck. Anya scoffed, clinging to the last vestiges of her pride, even as the walls of their family home closed in around them. She just got lucky with Vance, but the evidence was overwhelming. Other companies, hearing of Leah's prowess, were now approaching her for consulting services, not out of pity, but out of genuine admiration for her expertise. The sheer magnitude of their miscalculation began to sink in, a bitter, metallic taste in their mouths. Mr. Tran, stripped of his bravado, finally made the call. He didn't call Leah directly, not yet. His pride was still too bruised. Instead, he called a former associate, subtly probing for information, a way to connect, to appeal. The associate, a kind but direct man, relayed the Tran family's plight to Leah. Leah felt a familiar pang in her chest. The wounds of the past were still tender, the sting of being undervalued still fresh. But she also felt a newfound strength, a clarity of purpose that transcended the old hurts. She discussed it with Mr. Vance, who listened with quiet understanding. "Lee," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you owe them nothing. Your worth is not tied to their recognition. Whatever you choose, do it from a place of strength, not obligation." His words were a balm, reminding her that her choices were now her own, her path unburdened by their expectations. The confrontation was inevitable. It happened not in a dramatic, staged meeting, but at a prominent industry gala, an event Leah attended as a keynote speaker for Vance and Company. While the Tran family arrived as a shadow of their former selves, having been offered complimentary tickets out of pity by an old acquaintance. Leah, radiant in a tailored suit, her eyes bright with a newfound confidence, stood on stage, commanding the attention of the room as she spoke eloquently about supply chain resilience. She spoke not of herself, but of systems, of vision, of the value of every link in the chain. From the back of the room she saw them, her parents, aged beyond their years, their shoulders slumped, their eyes hollow. And Anya, still attempting to project an air of sophistication, but her gaze was fixed on Leah with an intensity Leah had never seen. In that moment, a profound shift occurred. It wasn't just Leah they saw on stage. It was the embodiment of their own colossal error, the living, breathing proof of the talent they had crushed, the potential they had scorned. The full, brutal weight of their mistake crashed down on them, not in anger, but in a devastating, silent realization of profound loss. The humiliation was a crucible for the Tran family. Their empire, once vibrant and bustling, was a husk, a testament to their profound ignorance and arrogance. They had to sell their family home, a symbol of their prosperity, to cover mounting debts. Anya's lavish wedding dreams evaporated entirely, replaced by the grim reality of a modest civil ceremony. The initial bitterness and resentment they felt towards Lee slowly, painfully, began to give way to a dawning, terrible understanding. They had not just lost a logistics manager, they had lost their daughter, her trust, and the very foundation of their business. Mr. Tran, once so proud and dismissive, finally swallowed his pride. He sent Leah a short, handwritten letter. Not a plea for help, but a stark, raw admission of his failure. "We were blind, Leah," it read. "We failed to see your true worth, distracted by our own ambitions and assumptions. We took you for granted. We are truly sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start, a tremor of genuine remorse. Anya, too, approached Leah with a newfound humility, stripped bare of her former entitlement. She met Leah for coffee, not in a grand cafe, but in the quiet bookstore Leah had once found solace in. I I just wanted to tell you how incredibly sorry I am," Anya confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "I saw you as someone who just handled things. I never saw you." She admitted her jealousy, her self-absorption, her profound regret. Lee listened, her heart aching for the past, but also sensing a fragile bridge being built. She offered no immediate forgiveness, no grand gesture. Her journey had been too hard, their blindness too cruel. But she acknowledged their words, a quiet nod that spoke volumes. The antagonist, in the form of their collective arrogance and prejudice, was finally won over, broken by the undeniable truth of Leah's success and their own downfall. Their pride had been dismantled, replaced by a humbling, albeit painful, clarity. Leah's decision was not about vengeance, nor about returning to servitude. It was about agency, about what was right, and about the profound power of one's own worth. She decided to offer a limited form of professional assistance, not as an employee, but as an independent consultant on her own terms, at her own rates. She would help them restructure their remaining assets, perhaps salvage a small, niche operation. But the era of Leah as the unseen, undervalued workhorse was irrevocably over. She would guide them, but they would have to do the work, to build from the ground up, with respect as their new cornerstone. This act, born of strength and a deep, complicated love, showed her ultimate triumph was not just in her own success, but in her capacity to foster a profound, if painful, transformation in those who had once sought to diminish her. The path to rebuilding for the Tran family would be long and arduous, but for the first time, it would be built on a foundation of respect, forged in the ashes of their former arrogance. Leah Tran, now a revered figure in global logistics, stood on the stage of the Global Supply Chain Summit in Berlin, addressing thousands of industry leaders. Her name was synonymous with innovation, her methods studied, her insights sought after. She had built her own consultancy, Transform Logistics, a name that subtly echoed her past while asserting her profound impact. It was a company known not just for its efficiency but for its ethical practices and its unwavering commitment to valuing every single person within the supply chain, from the factory floor to the boardroom. She spoke of her journey, not with bitterness, but with a quiet strength that resonated with every person in the room. She spoke of the unseen threads, the hidden talents, and the catastrophic cost of overlooking human potential. Her story had become a modern fable, a powerful testament to the fact that true value, like a deep river, cannot be contained forever. It will always find its way to the surface, carving its own path, enriching the landscape it touches. The Tran family business, though vastly reduced in scope, had found a fragile new beginning. Under Leah's professional guidance as an external consultant, they had restructured, focusing on a smaller, more sustainable niche market. Her parents, humbled and transformed, now operated with a newfound respect for their employees, for the unseen labor, and for the intricate dance of true business operations. Anya, too, had changed. She had taken on a new role in the revamped company, not as a glamorous figurehead, but working diligently, learning the intricacies of the trade from the ground up, stripped of her previous entitlement. She had discovered the quiet satisfaction of competence, a lesson painfully learned but deeply ingrained. Their recovery was slow, arduous, but marked by integrity, a stark contrast to their previous hubris. Leah's impact extended far beyond her family. Inspired by her story, industries began to reevaluate how they identified and nurtured talent, especially within their own ranks, leading to a new wave of recognition for undervalued employees globally. Companies initiated programs to identify hidden gems, people working in seemingly minor roles who possessed extraordinary skills and insights. The moral of Leah's story echoed loudly. Every person possesses intrinsic worth, a unique genius waiting to be unleashed. The true measure of a society, or a business, lies not in what it publicly celebrates, but in how it recognizes and empowers those who quietly hold its very fabric together. It teaches us that compassion, true discernment, and the willingness to look beyond the superficial are not just virtues, but necessities for genuine growth and lasting success. So, what silent architects exist within your own world, dear viewer? Who do you see every day, whose brilliance might be hidden beneath a common task, a quiet demeanor, or an underestimated role? Are you truly seeing them, or are you blinded by your own assumptions, your own expectations? Take a moment, truly look. Speak a word of genuine appreciation. Recognize the quiet competence, the hidden genius that resides in those around you. For sometimes, the greatest strength, the most profound impact, comes from the ones you never even noticed until they were gone. Share this story and remind someone today. True value is often found not in the spotlight, but in the steadfast, unyielding heart of the overlooked.